A very warm welcome to all of you joining the talk between the amazing and wonderful photographer Steve McCurry and myself, Karin Rehn-Kaufmann, art director and chief representative of the 25 Leica galleries around the world. Today, we will talk about the exhibition, The Eyes of Humanity, which is exhibited in the Ernst Leitz Museum at Leica headquarters in Wetzlar. A very warm welcome to you, Steve. Good to see you, at least online.
Great to be with you. I wish we were together, but here we are. What can we do?
Yeah, that would be absolutely much nicer to see you in real. And Steve, we had a lot of telephone calls and a lot of emails running back and forwards for this really extraordinary exhibition. And by the way, today, all the pictures arrived in a huge box in Wetzlar. And I'm really curious to see the exhibition because we planned it, of course, online. We had a long discussion about the colors on the wall, but we decided to have colors on the wall. And is that the first time that we use colors, that you decided to use colors on the wall for your exhibition?
Well, I think the colors really complement, the colors on the wall complement the photographs. And we have different colors for different bodies of work. So I think it was a really wonderful choice to have these colors which work kind of in harmony. There's kind of a rhythm to the photographs and the colors on the wall and the various sizes of the images. So I think it's a very well-crafted exhibition. I'm very proud, very honored to be in the museum.
Well, the contrary, I am honored to have you in Wetzlar, really. And because of COVID, we say the exhibition stays until mid of October. So hopefully we really will have a lot of visitors. Steve, you are one of the most iconic voices in contemporary photography since 40 years now. A lot of books, countless magazines, prizes, exhibitions. And of course, you were the first one who won the Leica Hall of Fame Award. And I had the honor to give you the prize during St. Moritz Art Master. And you traveled really, really a lot in your life. Mm-hmm. And how is it for you now with pandemic to be not able to travel? What are you doing? What are you photographing, or what are you working on?
Well, first of all, it was great to be presented with the first Leica Hall of Fame award and to be there with you and to receive it. It was, Leica has such an incredible tradition going back decades. And it's probably the best camera ever made and continues to be an incredible piece of equipment that we cherish.
I have to say the public that we don't pay you for that.
Sure, yeah. And I take this nose scratching out too. But yeah, in this in this COVID period, in a way, it's kind of been a blessing in disguise. It's been a time for me to be able to go through my archive. I've been able to work on 2 books.
Oh, wow.
During this period. I've actually moved my entire operation to another location, which is better and bigger. And I've been able to go through my work very carefully and do a lot of selection, go through bodies of work that I hadn't looked at for 40 years. So in a way, I've been able to really utilize the time. I've missed traveling and going to new places and going to old places, but I've been able to really use this time. Normally my schedule's so hectic and so busy that when I come home from a project, from a shoot, I have enough time to kind of do a selection, do the laundry and kind of go through everything. And then I'm kind of off to the kind of next location. So this is all changed now. And I've been able to really dig deep into my archive, and also spend time with the family, with my wife and daughter, which is great too, because we traveled quite a bit
Okay.
for the last few years, but it was on airplanes and security and lines and
We know it,
customs.
yes. And we don't miss it really. I
Yeah,
agree totally. Steve, what are the two books about?
well, the two books I've worked on during this COVID period, one was a book of pictures which have not been published before, new pictures which I found in my archive, which for whatever reason had gone unnoticed, unlooked, unselected. Again, you come back from a project and often you're kind of in a hurry. You do a first selection and then you kind of move on, and there's a lot of work that kind of, you pass over because you're in a hurry or your process was, you're not. So that was one book. The second book I'm working on right now, and we worked on it since last fall, is on children, children around the world.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's just, it's sort of old work and new work kind of put together, and children from all over the world. And it's great to see how, the universality of childhood, and how you might be a child in, in South America or China or Africa, but this common humanity which kind of binds us together. It really comes through because children are children, and they play and they get into mischief and they do all sorts of things. And so this
They
is
are children everywhere. Yeah, I know what you mean with a global common ground being a child, but the conditions, of course, are very different.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a look at my more than 40 years of photography, and it's been exciting to go through. And
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Steve, may I ask you, what was the main reason you decided to dedicate your life, your passion, your soul, everything what you have on photography?
Well, I started my kind of photographic journey really when I was studying filmmaking. I was kind of searching for something I could really sink my teeth in, something which I could be, passionate about, something with purpose. And I, back in the beginning, I thought, I love watching movies. I love film. And I thought, that would be a really exciting life to be a filmmaker. So as I studied cinematography and started working, in the course of that study, I took a class in still photography. And suddenly, instead of it being this kind of group effort with a sound man and a cameraman and the big editing machines and a lot of pre-production and post-production.
You're never alone. You're never alone.
Yeah. I discovered this sort of 35 millimeter camera, which I could take out on the street. I could roll my own film and literally walk out and wander and explore and photograph anything that sort of caught my eye or my interest. And it was a solitary endeavor, this kind of hunt, and it was able to, I found it was almost like a meditative state where I would walk out and I would suddenly, all my troubles and, worrying about my classes and friends, I was able to really, focus on my surroundings and what was happening in my world at that moment, looking at the sights and the smells and, cracks in the sidewalk and, a dog or something happening, people talking on the street. So I became kind of hyper aware of, you know, things around me and kind of lost in the moment. And I just,
Nice. This is nice what you just said. Lost in the moment, but
yeah.
also in yourself. So this is you always corresponding with what you see and what you have in yourself. And I mean, as far as I know, you mainly really always travel alone.
Well, I travel. Well, I started traveling with my family, but for,
Now, but
decades,
yeah.
30 years, I would travel alone. I would have a, you know, an assistant or a guide or an interpreter, somebody who could help me navigate the culture, the language, help me get around a town or a region. So it was really critical to have that one, you know, fixer, translator person. But apart from that, and occasionally working with a writer, but 95% of the time I was just a one-man band. I was just walking around and sort of reacting to what I saw and the environment around me. It's a wonderful, it's so liberating to walk out the door of your hotel or wherever you're staying, and you're just this freedom.
This is what some in a way we have to learn it, to be and to live in the moment, not being yesterday or tomorrow, because normally you plan and you are tomorrow, next week, next year. So this is what you're just telling about, is being in the moment, living in the moment, and seeing what is going around you, be aware of what is going around you. So this is wonderful. This is like a therapy.
Yeah. Well, I always, when I start my day, I would think, you know what, let's just enjoy, you know, being here, being on the street, being in this wonderful place. Let's not sort of think about pictures and photography. Let's first just, you know, just get into kind of a rhythm and see, look around. I don't want to sort of force, I don't want to force that creative process. I want to just let things, you know, just sort of get into a rhythm. So I generally just sort of start slow and let it kind of build. And I find that after a while, pictures start emerging and you start seeing things. And it's sort of like magic. You kind of, all of a sudden you're kind of, you know, aware, and things are, you're saying that you're connecting things, you're seeing juxtapositions of shapes and objects. And it's a really, and I always think, you know, I want to go to a place that fascinates me, that I want to be. One of my last trips before COVID was in Cuba. And I always want to be in a place that, even without the camera, even without really making any pictures, I just enjoy being there, being on the street, meeting people, kind of, you know, hanging out.
Without a camera, so this is also possible.
So, I mean, I have my camera, but the point is that I'm enjoying the day, and the you know, the pictures are kind of a bonus, but I'm there enjoying myself, just the strolling around. And of course, I, you know, make a lot of pictures, but it's also just a pleasure to
But that
be there.
means it's a correspondence, as I just said, between you and the surrounding, but you just let it go. That's what you just said. It's like a rhythm. You just go
Right.
out and you just are open and see what's happened, what the world or Cuba or the street or the people will tell you, or what you see. I mean, this is a nice situation. Steve, perhaps we will come now to some of your pictures out of the exhibition.
Okay.
This one, for example, this will be in a really, really big size, the master print from White Wall. And perhaps you can tell us where you took the picture, and if you were allowed to take part in the ceremonies of the monks. Because I mean, you did a lot about Buddhism.
Yeah. Well, I've always been fascinated with Buddhism from my first trip to India, Nepal in 1978, and subsequently went to virtually every Buddhist country in the world. So this has been an ongoing interest of mine. And one of the, so I did this sort of a book on Buddhism and Tibetan.
I know,
And
yes.
so one of the things which is not known so much is that martial arts came out of a monastery in China, the Shaolin monastery, and it kind of grew from there. But in that region in China, even today, they have, dozens of schools where these young, particularly young boys and young men, practice this discipline, this art. And I visited several of these kind of institutes or schools. So now it's kind of moved away from Buddhism. There is still some aspect of that, but it's more of a martial arts thing. But so I went there and I spent many days in different schools photographing young and old, doing all these incredible feats of strength. It was just amazing.
But this was shot in China, what I just showed, the image, right? Yeah. What fascinates you on Buddhism? Or in another question, what is your learning out of it for yourself in your life?
I think Buddhism pays particular attention, has a concentration of the idea of compassion, trying to improve one's mind, not being so judgmental. There's a kind of a non-violent component. They don't kind of proselytize. They're not out trying to win, converts. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I being in a monastery for me is a very relaxing. It's a kind of introspection. Watching the monks studying and doing their routines, I find it very soothing. There's kind of an overwhelming sense of people trying to improve their minds and trying to learn and trying to make the world a better place. Now, obviously,
to learn this, what we also, I mean, this is the word we heard very often today, is awareness. Awareness and silence, come to yourself, just cool down. So these are all the methods in a way, which comes at least from the Buddhism.
Right.
Yeah. So in the exhibition, we show a lot of your amazing and wonderful portraits. You just mentioned the portraits only from children out of this book, what you're just working on in the pandemic times, over 40 years. But we also have a lot of other portraits. And I was asking myself, how could it happen that you can get so close to these people? Very often, I assume, without speaking their language, without knowing them. And I will just show one image out of the exhibition. Perhaps you can tell us something about this person. How did you met him? And were you able to talk to him? Or what was the relationship between you and him?
Well, actually, I was actually doing a project on the last roll of Kodachrome. I had asked Kodak to if I could get the last roll of Kodachrome. I wanted to do a project on it because I used Kodachrome for like 20 years, and I have hundreds of thousands of transparencies of Kodachrome. So in that project, I wanted to go back to some of the places where I had began my career. And I had an idea that I wanted to photograph, since Kodachrome was a vanishing, iconic film, I wanted to photograph other things that were iconic. And I thought about this village, these nomads in India who used to travel with their flocks and around the country, and this is really coming to an end. And in that community, they have these magicians. Before television and radio, they'd have these wandering musicians who would go from village to village, performing tricks and doing acrobats. And this is an entertainment. They had a whole group of these magicians. So this was one of the last men who had gone from village to village, and he had this very flamboyant style, the beard and the orange henna dyed beard, and he was this very kind of elegant gentleman. And I found out where he lived, and my guide went there, and he was very honored to be photographed and very proud of the way he looked. And I photographed him in just a hut. Literally, it was around right before lunch, around 11.
You really were invited to his home, so that means you really get in contact with him.
Exactly.
So this,
and then I thought, well, this is really interesting, but where can we make his portrait? Because the light was really harsh. Like I said, it was around 11:30 in the morning. So I said, well, why don't we there was a little kind of a shed or a hut. So let's go in there because it'll cut down the light. And so it's simply the light. It's like it almost looks like a studio picture. It's just this blank wall and this light coming in from the doorway, and that was it.
Yeah. So going on in portraits, I will come now to your most iconic picture. And as far as I know, you visited Afghanistan for the first time in 1979, before the Russian invasion, and you went there dressed like a local. Yes. And in 1985, this wonderful and really impressive image from Sharbat Gula called The Afghanistan Girl was the cover of National Geographic. In 2002, you started to search her. Perhaps you can tell us this really moving story behind this very, very iconic image.
Well, at the time that I photographed her, there were maybe 2 or 3 million Afghan refugees living in camps along the Pakistan border, the Iranian border, and there was a systematic attempt to empty the countryside, the Russians, the Afghan army, the Soviet Union, in order to clear the countryside of any insurgents. So there were thousands of villages which were destroyed. So I was photographing the border, the fighting in Afghanistan and the refugees in these camps in Pakistan. And one day I was in a camp, one of these camps, and I was, again, I was almost ready to leave. And I heard these voices coming from a tent. And I realized it was a school, it was a classroom going on. So I kind of looked in and suddenly we saw these girls on the floor, and I asked the teacher if I could come in and make some photographs. I explained that, I was doing a story on the plight of the Afghan people, the refugees, and that I wanted to show what was kind of happening. But as soon as I walked in, I saw this girl in the corner, and I saw her eyes, and I thought, whoa, this is an incredible look. I mean, this is something very striking. And suddenly it's like, suddenly everything kind of went away. And I realized that the only thing I really want to accomplish in that moment was to make a portrait of her. So I set about trying to photograph some of the other girls and trying to set up to make her relaxed. And then eventually I asked the teacher if I could photograph her and if she could come over and sit down and I could make some pictures. So at first she was a bit shy, and she kind of covered her mouth and her nose. And the teacher said, no, the world needs to know who we are and see us. She was 12 years old, so there was no cultural taboo against that. So then she lowered her hands. I made a few pictures. I think she was looking at me with this curiosity
Mhm.
of like, who is this man and why is he dressed funny and why doesn't he speak our language? But I think there's also a bit of, the sadness in her expression because she was an orphan and she was a refugee living in this really kind of terrible refugee camp. So it was
That
this,
means, Steve, sorry to interrupt you, there were a lot of girls around in the school and you really were attracted by her because of her eyes.
yeah, as soon as I walked into the class, I my eyes went directly to her.
Mhm.
And there were probably 15 or 18 girls in the class. And it was this bright sunny day, but the side of the tent was open. And I made some pictures of some of the other students, but the only one I was really
Mm.
kind of really wanted to, the one I was really after was her, because she had those beautiful eyes and this kind of haunted expression. And I just thought, this tells the story right here of, I mean, Afghans are very attractive people. They have, great faces, and they have this kind of mixture of East and West, and
Mm.
the legend of Alexander the Great's army coming through, and then you have sort of South Asia, India, and then you have Central Asia to the north. Uh,
So it's
so
a
they're
great
really
mixture. Yeah.
handsome people.
Mm.
Um, and she had this incredible look. So and then I made the picture. 6 weeks go by. I hadn't, and then I get back and started looking through my slides, and I come across these pictures, which were kind of incredibly. Again, it's a simple portrait. It looks like a studio, but it's literally in this crowded classroom, dust everywhere, and people yelling, and just the backdrop of the tent. And I didn't, there was no direction. I didn't say, do this, do that, just simply look in my lens. And after a minute or two, she just got up and walked away. She didn't, I didn't, and then that was it. Then it was over. There was no,
There was no more contact between you and her.
yeah.
And how does it happen that you so many years later that you decided, and as far as I know, that was really a complicated search to find her, that you wanted to meet her again?
Well, right after 9/11, um, then this kind of war started with Afghanistan, and suddenly people remembered this Afghan refugee girl, and people were all wondering, like, well, where is she now, and who was she, and all these questions. So with a filmmaker, we decided to go back and do a documentary about Afghanistan, but we also wanted to see if we could find her. I knew we would never be able to find her because now she's like a 30-year-old woman living in Afghanistan, and she's from this Pashtun tribe, which is very, very conservative, and you are not allowed to meet or talk or have any contact with a woman.
Yeah.
But we went back, and fortunately we were able to find the school where I had originally photographed her, and through the teacher and other people in the camp, we were able to finally, after weeks and talking to hundreds of people, we were able to. Somebody came forward and said, I know her brother, and I know where her brother lives, and that was really the key, because once we found the brother, he was able to take us to her and her husband and her family, and then we photographed her again, and
But the story, I think the story goes on because did her husband died or something happened and she was alone and you helped her to find a house? Because in Afghanistan, a woman without a man is nothing.
Yeah, and we bought this house in her name. Actually the house was in her name, so she was the owner. Normally, property would be in the husband's name or the male part of the family. So this house was in her name, and we were helping her every month with financial assistance and helping her family in any way we could with medical expenses and all that. So we kept in touch. My sister went over 2 or 3 times to meet with her. I mean, I didn't want to go because being a man, it would just be easier.
Yeah.
So my sister went there, she talked to her, and it was.
But that means you still are in contact with her or your sister?
Yeah, my
From
sister.
time to time, so that means she's still alive, and
yes.
And
Yeah,
what was your impression when you found her again? Because unfortunately, I don't have the picture now, but there is a picture from her when you photographed her in, I don't know if it was 2002, no, later.
Yeah, 2002, yeah.
Okay, 2002.
No, she was living a very simple life in a village in Afghanistan. But once we were introduced to her again, and sort of her financial situation became a lot better. She was able to move and create a better situation for her family.
Because I remember that you once said these eyes, which you have seen when you photographed her when she was 12, changed in more sad and not so really clear eyes. That's what I remember, what you told me once.
Well, I think the change from in the 2 pictures, I think partly it's just that we all age, and it was just partly going from being a sort of a 12-year-old girl to a 30-year-old mother, and how difficult her life must have been in those years in between. The other thing too was that I think a lot of the second picture, the light was very different. In the first picture, there's this wonderful indirect light coming in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Very warm and kind of, and in the second picture, and she, when you're 12, your face is much different than when you're 30.
Of course,
and
yeah.
The second one, it was in the late afternoon. The light was more flat and not so warm, and it just was a different kind of.
At the same time, when we will show you the eyes of humanity in Wetzlar, we will also have an exhibition, arrivals and departures, from a Danish photographer. I don't know if you know him, Jacob Auersobol, and he is only and ever and will shoot in black and white. And I mean, I only know pictures from you in color. So what is your experience using black and white, or did you never shoot in black and white?
Well, for years, when I worked on a newspaper, I only used black and white. I used Triax.
That was years ago when you worked for the newspaper.
Yeah, I think that black and white was, of course, in the beginning of photography, that was the only game in town. And as you moved into the days of, Henri Cartier-Bresson and Henri Cortège and Brassai and August Sander and all these photographers, I mean, it was only black and white. So as you move into, black and white had this sort of, it was kind of considered it was a more traditional classical look. And in fact, it was always difficult to print in color. Color film was a bit tricky. It was more, you had to be more exact. Color printing, color books and magazines wasn't that great, in fact, So, but for me, the world is in color. So much of the story of culture is in color. Color's more authentic to life. We see in color. So to me, it makes more sense to photograph the world as it is. Now, nothing wrong with black and white. part of it is great and kind of abstracts things, and color sometimes is too much information. But I felt that to really do justice to cultures around the world, tell my story and show the world, in fact, it's more authentic to show the color. I just went down the color path.
Yeah.
It's, I think they're both fun. I think it's kind of, there's not a right, there's not a wrong. It depends. It's
No,
like,
absolutely not. It's different from each other. And I think to have these two exhibitions at the same time at like a headquarter, to have this really amazing, only black and white, and on the other hand, to see your so colorful pictures, this is really an experience for hopefully many of visitors looking at these two exhibitions. So I come now to the picture in Kuwait, color, a very, very special one,
yeah,
and a very special moment.
yeah,
It was in 1991.
yeah. In 1991, I had spent about 6 weeks in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Iraq, photographing this war. And I was there during the fighting and then after the fighting. And after the fighting, right before the war ended, Saddam Hussein had fired like 600 oil wells. He had blown them up and oil was flying everywhere. It was this environmental catastrophe. So I was there photographing that aspect of this conflict. And I would go into these oil fields. It was like a end of the world. It was like a movie set. You go into these oil fields, and there was all this destroyed equipment and these animals running around, and the cows and camels and horses. It was just, and one day I saw this herd of camels running, looking, I guess, for food or water, or looking for a way to escape. And I started following them in my Jeep. And I had a driver, we're driving through the desert. And I wanted to, because the camels were covered in oil and the smoke was basically black. So I thought, we got to find a place where I can get them against the fire so you can actually see them. Otherwise, they were just invisible. Everything was black. And eventually we came across that one small patch of fire. And I got my opportunity. I photographed it. And then we realized we were in this sort of this minefield. And we kind of slowly kind of inched our way back on this exact same tire tracks, which we had driven in on. And it was a terrible kind of
it's really
situation, but a dramatic picture that illustrated them.
And it shows what really was going on there.
Yeah.
So this is also very important also in your work. I mean, Steve, I don't know how many days, weeks, or months you normally traveled in your life and how many years you were at home. What is home for you?
Well, right now, home is where I'm sitting. This is my home in the background.
But I mean, when you traveled for so many years, for 40 years, I mean, this is now not your normal life because of COVID-19, but these always being on the track, always being in movement to another country and then coming back and change the pictures and everything, and then the next travel is waiting for you. So where do you feel home, or what is home for you?
Well, this past year I've been with my family. I got this house, and we got
So that means it's really the house. So this is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That in a way, I don't think I'll be going back. I mean, I'll always travel, always go place my family. I think those days of, being on the road, like one of those, hamsters in a wheel that goes around in the peak. I think those days are kind of over. I think, you want to evolve in your life, and you want to, there's new chapters, and you want to turn the page and do new things and have new experiences. And I think that I kind of want to do things going forward in a different way. And I don't want to be so frenetic and always feel like I have to be kind of
Somewhere
dashing
else.
from hither to yon. I want to be a little bit more selective. And also, I want to do, I think the older you get, you want to do things that you want to do. There's no need now to run around and do projects and assignments which you don't maybe believe in or aren't important to you. I mean, I think when you're younger, you kind of want to do everything, and you need to make a
Yes.
living. And I'm not, I'm in a different point now.
Yeah, yeah. So, but that means you always had the feeling your home is really New York, your home is your house when you were in Afghanistan or India or wherever. Because it's interesting, I asked this question once to Lenny Kravitz, and I mean, he's touring a lot for months in buses or trains or everywhere. And he said, I always have to have my home in myself. Otherwise, I'm lost. So
Yeah.
this is totally different from what you felt or are feeling. It's interesting.
That's very poetic. Yeah. No, I was always so intense. I was always this sort of focused so much on the project I was working on. I got to say, in all of my years of traveling, I never felt homesick except for once or twice here and there. I remember being in Afghanistan. It got dark. It was, 5:30 in the afternoon. I'm in this sort of house, and it's all stuffy and hot, and I didn't have a radio. There was nobody to talk to. I was just sitting in a corner. I thought, man, this is not fun.
I mean, Steve, you also were arrested I don't know how often, but you were arrested. So you not only had always nice experience when you traveled, that's because what you just said, feel homesick. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of feel lucky to be alive. I was in I was in a plane crash in Slovenia. I was held at gunpoint like 3 times in Afghanistan. I was shot at so many times in Afghanistan and in conflict zones. Put in jail 2 or 3 times.
I really adore this photographer going there and that we are able to see what is going on in these regions. Otherwise, I mean, and you are the one who is in danger then. Yeah. So we come now to Cuba. You were there, or you visited Cuba in 2010, the first time, and you went there the year before last year, so in 2019. Did you felt a change in these 9 years? Was it still the old Cuba we all knew, or?
Cuba is changing rapidly. When I first went there, people were on the street. They had time for each other. They would be outside talking. Kids were playing in the street. It reminded me of when I was a kid, and we would go out and play football or baseball on the street, and we were outside in the woods. Cuba was there. There was a sense of community, especially out on the street. No advertising. Nothing that really was. The people were dressed in a very, very. They were very stylish, but very, very simple. And as time's gone on, since now almost everybody's on their cell phone. Everything's right here with the phone. All the kids on the video game. Yeah. And so this being out on the street with your friends or the kids playing the street, it's become more, I guess, the way Europe and the States, and more of a sense of modernity. This idea that kids want to be on a screen and everybody's on the internet, and it kind of, everybody's doing their this instead of kind of communicating.
Yeah, so I like this picture a lot. And this was done in, so the year before last year, right?
Yes.
And also, yeah.
I like that picture a lot. It's actually one of my favorite pictures from my many trips to Cuba. And it kind of shows, it's kind of this juxtaposition of an ideal world, a fantasy world where we have dreams, hopes and dreams of you know, a better life, marriage, family. It's all very beautiful. And then juxtaposed with this kind of older woman who's just trying to get through the day. She has these 2 bags on her shoulders, and she's just, you know, I can't imagine what her life is like, but it's not easy. You know, life's difficult. And it's just these two, this juxtaposition, which I found really kind of powerful.
And you saw this. I mean, this is the important.
Well, I saw the, you know, I was walking down the street. I was actually, I saw her and I'd photographed her in the minutes before. And I saw that she was turning down this one avenue. And I just walked ahead, kind of saying, what will she be walking in front of or next to that I could, you know, that might make an interesting picture. So there was a bit of, pre-visualization going on at that time.
And this is a special street, as far as I know. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, again, this is wonderful. A mother with her 2 children walking down the street. I don't know, going home or going to.
But isn't this the street from the twins?
Yes.
What is it about the street with the twins? Are there only living twins?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a, you know, there's all these kind of hidden treasures in Havana. This architecture. You know, if the problem hadn't happened, if the revolution hadn't happened, and the embargo hadn't happened, I'm sure that all of the architecture in Havana would have been torn down, and all that beauty would have been lost. There'd all be skyscrapers, and I mean, obviously, it's a long story and it's complicated, and they have their problems and whatnot. But looking at the glass half full, there's this really wonderful charm to Havana.
And it's still there. When I look at your images, one can still see the charm and what the old Cuba in your images. My dear Steve, unfortunately, I mean, I prepared, of course, a lot of more questions and a lot of more pictures, but the time is running. And we will continue next Tuesday, but I have a last question for you. I mean, you looked and worked and still do it on a lot of images. What are the main reasons for you to say, this is a good image, this is a good picture? Why?
Well, the selection process is often long, and trying to come up with that, you know, it's funny, sometimes there's more than one favorite picture to a situation, but in the end you have to pick one. You have all these different sort of reasons for picking one picture over the other, all these, and in the end you just pick one based on your criteria for what you think a good picture is.
I think mainly on your emotion, isn't it?
It's emotion, it's what has lasting value, which picture is, you know, the composition, the light, the this and the that.
I assume, of course, there are different aspects, yes.
But there's always one thing which is special. I mean, I find that 98% of the time, there's one determining factor. And so you pick that one based, because it's close, you know, but there's always one that's just a little bit better. So
than the other one.
yeah.
Okay, okay. So my dear Steve, thanks a lot for taking your time. We will see us in 1 week for the press conference, I think mainly at the same time at 3 o'clock, I think. And Jacob will also be part of it. And I hope a lot of journalists, also not only from Germany, will take part. We will hope and see.
Okay.
And thank you all for joining the talk between Steve and myself. And of course, I hope that a lot of you will be able to visit the Eyes of Humanity in the Ernst Leitz Museum in Wetzlar. So, bye-bye. Thank you for joining and take care.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you.